Dragons throughout history. Number 7. When did the earliest stories about dragons start appearing? If we were to try and pin this one down, we would most likely end up on a merry wild goose chase. This is due to the very simple fact that people told stories and shared legends of all kinds way before we ever had the idea that maybe we could write them all down one day. However, if we go along the trace of written records, one of the earliest dragon tales ever comes from the Epic of Gilgamesh, a great and wonderful work of literature from Mesopotamia, and also one of the earliest surviving ancient texts we know of. The stone tablets on which this amazingly long poem was inscribed have been dated to the time of the 3rd dynasty of Ur, which means approximately 2100 BC. And here we find one of the earliest depictions of a terrifying fire-breathing beast with fangs that fits the idea of a dragon. Of course, these kinds of stories about gigantic beasts flying around were present in other civilizations as well, so we see them in the records of ancient Greeks, the Sumerians, and others. Moreover, these earliest dragons were not always flying around and breathing fire. There were myths of dragons that lived in forests, caves, never breathed fire, dragons that came out of the ocean, or lived inside mountains, rivers, or in swamps and bogs. Number 6. What kind of dragons did people imagine existed in the world? When we think of dragons, most of us imagine those grotesquely overgrown lizards with bat wings, fire breath, yellow fangs, terrifying claws, spiky tails, and one hell of a nasty temper, selfishly sitting on a mountain of gold. However, if we take a dragon tour around the world, we see a different picture. One notably different idea are the Chinese and more broadly general Asian dragons. They look more like snakes than lizards, with long, thin bodies, comparably tiny legs, usually with some kind of a mane along the whole of their body. For whatever reason, they also tend to have antlers instead of the usual spiky bull-like horns we are used to, and they often sport incredibly long whiskers, like the ones you would typically see on a catfish. These dragons were usually associated with wind or water, with the sea or the rain or storms or such. They were all very wise, sometimes friends and sometimes enemies to mankind, and usually pretty temperate, until someone ticked them off. Then they would wreak havoc upon the face of the world. Some Slavic myths depict 2 distinct subspecies of dragons. One was the wise and powerful friend, and the other a violent abomination which also frequently had several heads to eat people with. Number 5. What animals might have inspired the idea of dragons? Much like someone mistook a mammoth skull for solid evidence of the existence of Cyclops, it is easy to see where our ancestors might have gotten their ideas about dragons. They could have come across the skeletons of various dinosaurs or other prehistoric beasts or whales and attributed these to the dragons from the legends. It is not uncommon for fossils to inspire myths, as people would naturally wonder about what kind of creature that might have been once and what happened to cause its demise. As far as living inspirations go, one interesting theory is that spitting cobras were involved in the earliest ideas of dragons. It is easy to imagine how people would take their ability to shoot poison over amazing distances and the burning pain caused by the toxins and turn them into the fiery breath of a great nightmarish beast. Also, the crocodiles from the Nile, which were actually worshipped in ancient Egypt, swam over into southern Europe across the Mediterranean Sea, and their unusual appearance and scary teeth likely also contributed to the archetypal depiction of the toothy reptilian European dragon. The Komodo dragon, known all over the world today as the real-life dragon, was first officially recorded in 1910. But locals told tales of gigantic lizards ages before that, speculating that they might have been the adapted descendants of the dragons of old legends. Number 4. Why did people in ancient times believe that dragons were real? The short answer is because they did not have any tools to help them know any better, and because the most respected source or sources of information told them so. The longer answer is the stage at which civilization was at the time simply could not allow for it. These people could not take satellite photos, look for things in a globally available depository of information, or hop onto an airplane on their day off and get a bird's eye view of an area. The people in the past, especially in the Middle Ages, believed in dragons, behemoths, and all the rest of the zoo because those beasts were written about in the Bible and similar works. People believed in dragons, etc. because all the monks, scholars, artists, and generally the educated folks basically recycled the same few stories, books, and maps for a good long while. There were just too many gaps to fill and too few bricks to fill them. And let's not forget, they would have still come across the occasional massive skeleton in the ground. Since nobody knew anything about dinosaurs, dragons were an easy explanation. 3. What does it actually mean to say, "Here be dragons"? This phrase has been appearing as a book title, company name, song title, and a whole myriad of other things, but believe it or not, it started out as a genuine geographical label. Take a look at any ancient map or any modern reconstruction from a movie, a video game, etc. There is always at least one corner with a creepy drawing of a gigantic sea serpent, a kraken, an aquatic dragon, or some bird-like hybrid beast waiting on the edge of the map to devour unsuspecting ships. In the medieval era, it was a common practice among cartographers to draw these monstrous beasts in those parts of the maps which represented unfamiliar, undiscovered, or insufficiently explored areas of the world. These drawings were frequently accompanied by the phrase, "Here be dragons," which was carried over into modern day. Although it has long since been turned into a meme, "Here be dragons" is a legit idiom that means, basically, from here on out, you enter dangerous territory, or from this point on, we are not exactly sure what to expect, or simply, this is something I don't know anything about. Of course, medieval cartographers never saw actual dragons writhing around in the sea. This phrase was their way of warning all travelers about the dangers of entering unknown lands or sailing uncharted seas. Number 2. What happened to dragons after Christianity entered the picture? Like we already mentioned before, the many ideas and depictions of dragons varied greatly over cultures, territories, and time, but wherever you looked, they would have this shifting kind of reputation. Sometimes dragons were terrifying monsters, dangerous, harmful, and brutally violent. Sometimes they were friendly advisors, helpful, protective, or just fun to hang around with if you were a jaded old wise man too bored of life among your fellow humans. However, as Christianity slowly spread into becoming the dominant religion on a global scale, the image of dragons steadily shifted towards the dark, destructive, and evil. They had grown to be connected quite strongly with the ideas and images of Satan, the ultimate evil, and the fiery, abominable pits of hell. By the Middle Ages, most people got their daily dose of dragon lore from the Bible, which was really not a flattering portrait for the big lizards. Just think about that monster with the fiery breath from the book of Job. This, of course, led to the resurrection of the dragon slayer trend in stories, except that this time around, the heroes were not ancient noblemen on a quest for love, kingdoms, immortality, or wisdom. The new dragon slayers were saints, the most famous of them all being, of course, St. George, who saved a town from a terrible dragon, killing the monster while protected by the sign of the cross. Dragons got the villain role, but the many ancient legends survived through new beliefs into modern day, and nowadays we have the nice dragons appearing again. Number 1. Dragons in culture and in the collective mind. Most people these days will readily and strongly argue that dragons don't exist, and many more would argue the opposite. But the scaly beasts are very much alive in our collective imagination. Myths and legends about dragons in their many various forms and styles survive in cultures across the world, and they provide a gigantic pool of material for cultural creations. You will find dragons at festivals, school plays, in movies, games, music, art, on furniture, on dishes, clothes, and basically anything, anywhere that humans have meddled in. Books and series like A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, The Hobbit, Harry Potter, and hundreds of thousands of others keep the dragon legend alive and tend to add to it as well. They give dragons human feelings and the ability to think and speak like us, which has made the mighty monsters surprisingly relatable, increasingly friendly, and often downright hilarious. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to press that subscribe button. Coming up next, 8 dragon sightings explained. Fell from the sky. In August 2016, there was a video posted online which supposedly depicted a real dragon found dead on a beach. The video earned over 1.5 million views within just 3 days after it was initially uploaded, and the story